Hi, this is a screencast video for ORA showing how ORA can help TMG users do faster and less error-prone data entry. In this video, I'm going to use the newspapers.com site and a death notice and create an obituary event and a citation for that event in TMG. So let's start. I've already done a search in newspapers.com and I found the obituary you see, the death notice you see here in the middle of the page. The red rectangle around the article is something that newspapers.com does when it has identified an article and extracted it. Unfortunately, in this case, it's a little off. It's not getting the bottom line of text. And I'm going to take an extra step here and correct that as I go through and add this record into TMG. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is I'll make a clipping, and that's how I'll correct the problem with that rectangle. I'm going to position the clipping rectangle carefully so that I get all the text I'm interested in and no other text. So that looks good. I'm going to key in Lewis Cardinal Death Notice as the name of the clipping. Seems like a good name. So I'm ready. Hit clip, and I've created the clipping. Let's go and view it. Hit view clipping. Now, so far all we've done is all newspaper.com things. Next thing the newspaper.com does is it actually extracts from the image, or it can extract from the image, the OCR of the text. So the OCR text here has got a few errors in it, misspelling of Rosendale, misidentification of the word beloved. We'll ignore those for now. We can fix those up later if we copy the text into TMG. You can save this image. You can view it by hitting open. I hit that button. Now I'm going to go back. Or you could download it by hitting the download button. I'm not going to save this image in this case. I do save some, but I probably wouldn't save this one. So anyway, that's all newspapers.com. Let's take a look at the ORA control panel. The ORA control panel is up here on the left. I just use its open and download links to look at the image. It's got some field information here. The name, which is the name of the clipping, and that is Lewis Cardinal Death Notice, the one I assigned it. It also has the paper location, paper date, and the page number from which this article was drawn. It also has three more fields down here: city, state, and country. I'll come back to those later and show you how those are added. Those are not part of the normal, the default newspapers.com control panel. Those are customizations that I made, and you could make them too. It's not special just because I'm the author of ORA. So what we do here, well, I've got this auto type buttons up in the upper left, and the second one I know from memory says TMG obituary event, start and date. The next one says TMG citation, start and source number. So let's switch over to TMG. Now this is Lewis Cardinal. This is a test database, so I don't have any other events for him. But normally you'd have his parents and, birth, death, what have you. I've just found the obituary and I want to add the obituary. The instruction said to start in the date field. So I'm going to hit the F4 function key to open TMG's tag type list. I'm going to key the first few letters of the event type, which is obituary, and hit enter. So far that's all been manual, but now I'm at the point where the auto type expects me to have TMG positioned. So let's go back to the browser, and I'm going to hit the number 2 button. It says start and date, and I'm doing that. Okay, so that typing you just saw was all ORA. It entered a date over here, a sort date, which I'm going to come back to, and then the place information. Now I put the name of the paper in the addressee, city in Boston, state Massachusetts. The county was not identified. I happen to know the county is Suffolk, so I'll add that now. Okay, so now it's pretty much ready in terms of the date and place. Well, let's explain the sort date a bit. Sort date's over here. The date is taken from the date of the newspaper, 6 February. For my purposes, I like to add 2 weeks to that date as the sort date. That pushes the obituary down to the bottom of the person entry, and there usually won't be anything after that unless I do some probate and will work. And if I do, I might choose to adjust the date further. But for people for whom I don't go and do that research, I would leave the sort date as 2 weeks after the obituary, the date the obituary appeared in the paper. And I do that mostly so that the obituary follows the burial event, which I am probably going to add later, because it's common for the death notices to come out before the burial. Okay, so I'll show you how to adjust that sort date a little bit later. Okay, so now let's do the second part, which is to add a citation. I'll hit F4 again. That'll bring up the citation window. As you can see, the source number is selected and it's 0. Let me go back over to ORA in my browser. And if you recall, when I hovered over AutoType button number 3 up here on the left, when I hover it says TMG citation, start and source number. Okay, well I'm doing that. I've got the source number selected, I've got the citation event window open, so I'm ready for AutoType number 3. I click AutoType number 3, it enters the source number, and then it goes and it enters the citation detail. For death notices, I'm a lumper, so I put multiple pieces of important information in the citation detail. The first part is the name, second part is the paper, third part is the paper location, paper date of the issue, and the page number. Now I don't have to remember, what the sequence is or what items are required because ORA does that for me. I had to teach ORA that that was the sequence I wanted, but once I do that, I don't have to worry about it anymore. So ORA just creates the citation for me. Also, ORA leaves the cursor, the text entry cursor, down here in the first surety field. So I'm going to fill that in now by just typing 3333. So I'm confident it's the person. I'm entering the date of the paper from the actual image of the paper, so I think that's accurate. The place is the newspaper name and location. That's accurate, and I'm about to enter the text, so I have that as a 3 also. Now you might enter those as 2s because I'm not actually seeing the paper. I'm seeing an image of the paper, but I tend to use 3s for that. So I'll hit OK, and I've got the citation added. And now let's just do our last step, which is to copy in the text. I hit the button in newspaper.com that shows the text, and now I select it. Oh, selected a little too much. And here we go. So I've got the text selected. I just hit a Control-C to copy it, switch back over to TMG, and enter the text. Now, there's some errors in here. I'll clean those up. Normally, I would clean those up right now, but for the purposes of the video, I'll just leave that and come back to it later. So now we've created our obituary event and our obituary event citation, and we're done. Now, that may have seemed to take a long time, but remember, I was explaining things as I went along. Normally, I wouldn't do all that explaining. I just, do the steps and create an event and a citation very, very quickly. And quickly without introducing errors, I might add. Now I'll show you some of the work I had to do to make that go as seamlessly as it did. In particular, I'm going to show you the city, state, and country fields, how those got created, and then I'm also going to show you the 2 AutoType templates that I created. I'm not going to go through all the details of those, but I will show you that there's not a lot of magic. It's really just a few rules, a few constructs just used over and over. So let's start. One of the text templates I added was for city. So if we come back over here, you can see I have a city field, Boston, state, Massachusetts, country, USA. Well, it turns out that newspaper.com does not split those out. It just puts Boston, Massachusetts. So I want to separate those out so I can enter them into fields in TMG. So I've created some text templates that'll give me those fields and show them in the control panel. First field is city. To do that, I take the location value. I'm going to go back over to ORA now. And you can see it, location there is why I used location here. That's the name of a field in the control panel that ORA creates automatically. I'm going to use a split count feature, which is going to split the field into multiple parts. You know that it has city and state. So I'm going to say if the split count is 2, if there are only 2 parts, then I want to split the location by a comma, and I want the first part. So this is how I get the city. Next, I have a template state. It does the same thing. It checks that the location field has 2 parts. You can see that here. And then I'm going to split it again by a comma, and I'm going to use the second part. That's the state. Third, I'm going to do the same split, which is going to get the state name, but I'm going to follow it by looking up abbreviations of U.S. states. And if it is a U.S. state, that is the state name, then I'll use USA. Now, newspapers.com has mostly newspapers in the United States, so I could probably just put that in as a literal. But this will catch the case where it's, a Canadian newspaper or what have you. So that is how I set the values of the city, state, and country. Now, I could do that all in the AutoType template, but this separates it out and makes each one relatively simple. Each one does one thing. One gets a city, one gets a state, one gets whatever, the country. Now let's look at the AutoType templates. So these are the templates that create, these text templates are what created the fields you see here, city, state, and country. Now let's look at the AutoType templates that actually went and did the work of doing data entry into TMG. So I look at AutoType template number 2, obituary event, start and date. That's just a title I assigned. I knew I wanted it to go into TMG. The various controls that'll be in the template are set up for a TMG entry. If you were going into Roots Magic, you'd have to have a different template. Okay, so the first field in the data entry of a TMG event is the date. So like location in the previous example, I start with the date, and that comes from here, 6 February 1937. And I use a date transform. What the date transform does is format a date into a different format. So don't get confused. The first field here has got to be a field of data, but the next one is a transform. It's going to take and convert the value into something else. So the date transform accepts a little pattern here which says what I want. A D, MMM, YYY. So what I want is the day number, the month abbreviation, and then the year number. And that's how I get 6 Feb 1937. Now I chose that. I could have just inserted the date, and TMG probably would have recognized it and converted it. But I know that TMG prefers that format. Now you can customize TMG for various data entry format on dates. This is how I have mine. It does a good job because it doesn't have to change it much. As you can see from this format, if I go into TMG now, it looks very similar to the date format shown here. And if I open this event, very similar to the one shown here. So I could actually make it exactly the same if I wanted, but let's leave that for later. Okay, after entering that value, we have a tab. And that does what you'd expect. If you were entering an event manually, you would enter a date, you'd key a date, and then you'd hit tab, and you'd do the sort date. Well, that's what we do here. We hit tab, and now we have another variable. This one's a little longer. So this one starts with the date again. So that'll be the 6 February 1937 date we saw in the ORA control panel. But now it has a different transform. It has a date add transform. Date add is going to add something to a date. In this case, it's going to add 14 days. That's the same as 2 weeks, obviously. So we're going to add 2 weeks to the date before we insert it into TMG. Then we use the date transform again like we used on the first field, and we convert it to the day, month, year form, same as we did before. Now we have another tab, and here's a special control called fast. Up to this point, ORA would have been doing its data entry at its normal speed. That speed should be slow enough that programs can keep up with a computer doing data entry. However, TMG does some manipulation of dates when you enter them. And I want to make sure that I don't go faster than TMG can handle. So up to this point, I just used ORA's normal speed. After this, I know TMG does very little for each field. Just you just key into the fields and you can go as fast as you want. So I use ORA's second mode of speed of operation, which you can start by going fast. All right, so now into that field that is now the first field of the address, I put the paper, which is the name of the paper. I tab twice to go, oops, I tab twice to go from the addressee field down to the city field. Then I enter the city, which I computed above using the text template. Tab again to get to the next field. Do county. I don't have a county. I tab again. I get to the state field. That's why the state is there. Tab again. I get to country. And then tab again. And that actually leaves me in the surety field. So while this looks like a lot of, some of you may say even hieroglyphics or a lot of computer technobabble, it's actually just a combination of a few things put together. So this right here is a reference, or city is probably a better example. City is a reference to the city field. And it has brackets like you use when you create sentences in TMG. And that's how ORA knows to substitute the name of the city when it's keying data entry into TMG. You can actually manipulate the results, which I did with the transform here. But those are just an extension of the reference to the field. So date says I want to convert a date value into a different format, and that's what you do there. And we have date add, which can add 14 days to a date. You can add 20 days, you can add 6 days, you can add a year, you can add a month. But in this case, I did 14 days. So that's how I created the templates, and that's how I create obituary events when I'm using newspaper.com as the source for the obituary. I hope you found that interesting, and I hope you see how it can help you create accurate information in TMG while doing it at a very fast speed. Thanks. If you want to know more about ORA, go to the ORA website at oraextension.com, ora-extension.com.